I thought it was wonderful. Good to be here. You having a good time? Awesome. I have a few minutes to spend with you, and I want to thank Jim and the New Beginnings crowd for allowing me the opportunity to share some thoughts with you today. It's always a pleasure to be in a room and have an opportunity to share time with my good friend Ed Cordero. It's always nice to have the chance to get off in the corner and talk a little bit and catch up because we talk on the phone a lot, so it's always nice to see his face in person. It's also a pleasure to be here because I understand Thursday night we celebrated the accomplishments of one of our good friends, Jay Hant. He was awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award. Isn't that awesome? New Beginnings, 30 years Lifetime Achievement Award. I think that's pretty good because wouldn't you agree, Jay looks not a day older than 32, right? And he acts like not a day older than 17, right? But what I really love about Jay, and I think you would share this, is that Jay is the type of guy who always, in everything he does and commits himself to, gives 100%. Wouldn't you agree? Which is why we're here today. It's also, now that Jay is getting on in years, he still contributes 100%. Mondays, he gives 18%. Tuesdays, he gives 30%. Wednesdays, you get the idea. Oh, the roast was on Thursday night, right, Jay? Was that? Okay. So let me share with you some thoughts. I'm going to piggyback on what other speakers have said. And I always like the introduction when they go, Dr. Scott's the president of Life, and he's a Northwestern grad. And everybody goes, did I hear that right? Northwestern grad? What the heck was the Board of Trustees thinking when they hired this guy? So if you don't know my story, I'm like a recovering chiropractor. And I say that sincerely because I am. You know, I was in practice for 10 years in a PI, work comp, condition-based practice, doing exactly what I thought chiropractic is, exactly what I was trained really well to do, by the way, at Northwestern. And it was 10 years before I was even exposed to chiropractic philosophy or principles. 10 years. I mean, believe me, I had heard things like above, down, inside out, let the power that make the body. I heard that stuff, don't get me wrong. And I thought you guys were all a bunch of nut jobs. Seriously, because that's what they think. See, I lived in the left side of my brain. Some people would say a short distance from my body, which is probably true. I was very analytical. I was one of these folks who was always into the research, who was throwing things up and talking about this and that. I mean, I have a PhD in physiology, for Pete's sakes. I kind of lived there. Wouldn't you agree? And it wasn't until I got exposed to chiropractic philosophy, because see, after 10 years in practice, I literally was going to leave the profession. On my 36th birthday, I remember walking around my house in Canada. It was snowing, and I came back down and I sat down with my wife and I said, I cannot do this anymore. We had the house, we had the cars, we had the vacations, we had the 3 practices, and it was the most unfulfilling time of my life. It still chokes me up to this day, and if it wasn't for a good friend of mine who went to a different school, who had one of those thriving practices, who loved going to work and helping people every day, who said to me, you need to start going to some of the seminars that I go to. Changed my life. And I got exposed to chiropractic philosophy for the first time in an intellectual, comprehensive, rational way. And it literally changed my life. And I'm sitting here going, why the heck is it in our profession we have all these schools that think you shouldn't talk about philosophy unless it's from a historical, antiquated perspective? It doesn't make any sense to me. You're seeing the science and the stuff that's coming together. What we're lacking is the opportunity to have a cogent conversation about a meaningful application of our philosophy. That's our challenge. Unfortunately, we're still seeing that today because, frankly, 14 out of the 17 chiropractic colleges in the United States do not teach chiropractic philosophy, other than from a historical perspective. So it's not the students' fault. It's not even the faculty's fault. They're not even exposed to our conversation. So how can they embrace it? We're talking at each other as a profession, not with each other. Wouldn't you agree? And right now, we're sitting at an opportunity As Jill said, there's been no better time to be a chiropractor right now. We spend more per capita on healthcare than any country in the world. As Jill said, we are now in fact, we exceeded gross domestic product this year with coronavirus. We are at an unsustainable level of spending in the healthcare delivery system. The United States economy cannot sustain this model anymore. It's our biggest, single greatest economic risk as a country. We rank in the lowest quartile of all health metrics of industrialized nations. The lowest quartile, despite spending more per capita, we are the sickest population on the planet. I'm not being hyperbolic here, folks. We are the sickest. Did you hear that? The sickest population on the planet. 60% of the American public have metabolic disorders. Obesity, cardiovascular disease, asthma, neurocognitive disorders. We are in a world of hurt. And then we've just experienced what we've experienced as a country and a nation and a planet. There's never been a time when what you have to offer has been needed in our communities and in our country than there is today. We just have to do it. We have to group up and carry that message forward in an organized, cogent, rational way. Wouldn't you agree? And I'm going to suggest something to you. I love chiropractic philosophy. It changed my life. These types of meetings allow us to bond and build tribe, which is really important in moving forward. But I got to tell you something. There's something else really important in our conversation that if we do not collectively start to do, this is the negative part of my talk, we will be regulated off the planet in the next 10 years. We're not in the same place we were 30 years ago, or 40 years ago, or 50 years ago for some of you. The environment is very different. It's always changing. We do not live in a vacuum. As much as sometimes we practice in a vacuum. Do you know the distinction there? We are not an island of 68,000 individual chiropractors. We are a singular, licensed, regulated profession that lives in a vacuum of conventional healthcare delivery system, whether we like it or not. And by the way, it's a great conversation as to whether we want to belong there. Don't get me wrong. But I'll tell you, unless something changed in the last 24 hours in all 50 states in this union, we're already in it. Right? So let's start to play the game. Let's start to act like a separate and distinct healing profession within this thing called the healthcare landscape and do what we need to do to move our profession forward. And I'm going to say one thing in the next 10 years. If we don't do it, research. Research. Chiropractic works. We all know it does. We see it here. We see it in our practices. And then I have one question for you. It works great. Compared to what? Right? Compared to what? How do you know? And then here's the big one, folks. I don't want to step on any toes. So what? Right? Those are questions we have to collectively get behind. Chiropractic works. Compared to what? Chiropractic is great at lifestyle and, all the things we hear. And I say, okay, how do you know? And then the big question is, so what? The so what one's a little easier to answer because I started this conversation with the answer to the so what. We're in a world of hurt. But everybody in this room needs to be involved in that conversation. The schools can't do it alone. The schools can't do it alone. Selena was in here talking about the ICA yesterday and the Medicare bills that are being dropped. Consequential stuff in your practice, particularly if somebody over the age of 65 or 62 walks in your office, right? Whether you're a participating provider or not, doesn't get you out of it. Federal mandate. That's a really important bill. So if you are not a member of the ICA, then if you do nothing before the end of this weekend, join. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying don't join IFCO and other organizations. Join them all, please. But we have to get our voice behind our organizations that are literally having an impact in these conversations. Sound good? So, do that. Here's the other thing for me, too. I love the passion in chiropractors. I was talking with Eric at breakfast this morning. I said, you know, there is nothing more formidable than a mom on a mission. Wouldn't you agree? Out of the way, man. Out of the way. And we're in one of those conversations right now that we have an amazing opportunity to do. But I want to disclose something to you, and it gets a little bit to how we proceed as a strategy. Here's Rob Scott's disclosure. I am not anti-vax. I'm not against vaccinations, folks. I'm going to tell you something. As a PhD in physiology, if you inject a vaccine into your system, it will trigger your adaptive immune response. End of sentence, period. You with me? I am against the ideology that you can only get health from the outside through drugs. Okay? I'm against that. I'm against the idea that the best way to do that is through an artificially induced adaptive immunity. I think it's better to get it through natural exposure. Wouldn't you agree? I'm against the pathologizing of the entire human experience for the singular purpose of selling you and people in your communities more drugs. I am against that. See what I'm talking about? We're talking about being against ideologies on how to affect the healthcare system. If somebody wants to get vaccinated, and by the way, there could be a really good reason to, if it comes along. So let's focus on the issues of informed consent and the things that matter in the dialogue, as opposed to getting distracted in additional conversations. If we stay in that lane of an ideological conversation about the best way to obtain and express health, that's our lane. It's not an anti-vax lane. Despite the fact now that Merriam Dictionary has just changed their definition of anti-vax. Are you aware of that? It's gone from now being an individual who's opposed to receiving a vaccination to an individual who's opposed to receiving a vaccination and is opposed to mandatory vaccinations. So I guess we are anti-vaxxers, right? So I want us to focus on that collectively and come together and create a professional strategy on how we move forward. That is our opportunity to get our schools together, to get our professions who are aligned with us together and create a strategy of messaging so that we can capture the moment. Because we have a moment right now. Wouldn't you agree? Jill texted me the other day and said, the whole world's gone mad. What I text back to you? I said they already were mad. We just live in a different world. And that's our opportunity, is to create a message that makes sense to them and move the profession forward. And we need each and every one of you in that conversation. Does that make sense? We're all here because we have a dream for a better society, a better world, a healthier one for our kids and children. Wouldn't you agree? You come to these environments and you see multi-generational people here now, right? It's fun to see the families coming through when they had kids, and now their kids have kids, and now there's grandkids here. How cool is that? All living this lifestyle. We're here because we have a dream for a better health and a better society. It's what our schools were founded on. Giving people hope in the healthcare conversation, not being like all the other ones. It's having a different way of looking at health to give person a choice in their healthcare. And that's what our jobs are. So I'll end on this. If you've heard me speak, I love this quote by James Allen. The greatest accomplishment is but at first a dream. The mighty oak rests in the acorn. The bird sleeps in the egg. And in the greatest vision of a spirit, a waking angel stirs, because a dream is a seedling for reality. A dream is a seedling for reality. I want you all to go out and plant seeds so that we can make our dream a reality. Love and appreciate you. Thanks for the time to speak. See you later on.